In 1945, our Blessed Mother came to Amsterdam, and for the next 15 or so years, she appeared with a message that would change the world. Hello, this is Dr. Mark Miravalli with MaryCast. Welcome, and we are going to be discussing the messages of the Lady of All Nations. These messages were given official ecclesiastical approval on May 31st, 2002 by the local bishop, Bishop Joseph Maria Punt of Amsterdam. And as you know, when the church is evaluating and discerning a private revelation, it is always the local bishop that has the first course of decision. And indeed, with a real grace and peace, on May 31st of 2002, Bishop Punt declared that the essence of the message of the Lady of All Nations is consisting of a supernatural origin. So, what I want to do with you is to delve into this message and answer the question, what is the relationship between these messages of the Lady of All Nations in Amsterdam with the present movement for the Fifth Marian Dogma? And let's start here by way of some background. Now, the movement for the Fifth Marian Dogma begins at least 25 years before Amsterdam, technically in the 1910s, with the efforts of the great Cardinal Mercier of Belgium. And he began to gather petitions from bishops, submitting them to the Holy Father for a solemn definition of Our Lady's universal mediation, which included the understanding of her co-redemption. In the 1920s, the early 1920s, St. Maximilian Kolbe, as Father Maximilian Kolbe, joins this campaign calling forth his followers, his friars, to also work and petition for this dogma of Our Lady's universal mediation. So it is some 20 plus years before any of the apparitions in Amsterdam that we have the beginning of this call for a solemn definition that Our Lady is indeed the spiritual mother of all people. She's the universal mediatrix, serving under these three aspects as co-redemptrix, mediatrix, and advocate. It then is interesting in a historical note that on 1943, in the latter part of 1943, the Dutch bishops make a consecration of their country, of Holland, to the Immaculate Heart of Mary for the end of World War II, for their protection. And in the consecration and in the document, they call Our Lady the co-redemptrix, mediatrix of all graces, and advocate. So, historically, it's important to note that Our Lady appearing in Amsterdam as the Lady of All Nations can really be seen as an answer of Our Lady to the consecration requests of the bishops of the Netherlands for her special protection. Yeah, it's true. Where Our Lady is invited by the hierarchy of the church, she comes in 100-fold. And that's what takes place in Amsterdam. She's invited in, and she comes in. Now, the apparitions to Ida Perdaman between 1945 and 1959 take place in a series of visions and three-dimensional apparitions. There's also elements of what we would call mystical transport, where Ida is brought to a place and asked to experience it in some fashion, to pray for the individuals there, most of all to record. So the reason why the Bishop of Amsterdam had such clarity in terms of making a statement of approval in May of 2002 was that all three of the criteria that the Church looks at in discerning an apparition were supra-satisfied in the case of the Amsterdam apparitions. And that would be, number one, the message contents. Are the messages according to the faith and morals teachings of the Church? Are there no contradictions between what Our Lady reportedly says and what the Church definitively says? Because we know that never could there be a falsity from a private revelation that would run counter to the authenticity, to the truth, as the magisterium of the Church teaches it. So, number one is you always look at the message content. Is the message in conformity with the faith and moral teachings of the Catholic Church? Number two, the phenomena. What's the nature of the ecstasy reported by the alleged visionary? How is the message communicated? Is it according to standards found in the mystical tradition of the Catholic Church? And then number 3, the spiritual fruits. Jesus tells us, you will know a tree by its fruits. What have been the international fruits of these apparitions? Well, again, by way of summary, there are no doctrinal contents of the apparitions that in any way run contrary to the faith and moral teachings of the Church. In fact, the Mariology of the message of Amsterdam is absolutely sublime. It is really taking the cream of the greatest Mariological insights in terms of Our Lady's role as mother, as co-redemptrix, mediatrix, and advocate, and summarizing it in a number of individual messages. The messages are profound. There's not a single doctrinal error in the message. Secondly, the phenomena of how Ida received the messages is in complete conformity with the mystical tradition of the Church. Her experience of ecstasy, even some of the mystical experiences of her call to suffer during the messages in a type of union with Our Lady's suffering also is square away in the midst of the mystical tradition of the Catholic Church. And thirdly, the fruits. Indeed, since 1945, when these apparitions began, the prayer of the Lady of All Nations and the petition for the Fifth Marian Dogma have extended throughout the world. And we'll be talking about this as we talk about the individual messages themselves and what exactly Our Lady is calling us to do. So I want to begin by reading, and we'll be going through just a sample of this rich body of messages, but I want to begin with the first apparition on March 25th, 1945. Remember, the context is World War II, and the people of Holland, like the people of Europe, are praying for an end to World War II. And in the midst of this, on March 25th, the Feast of the Annunciation, which actually in Amsterdam has yet another import, because in Amsterdam, in March of 1345, that's right, 1345, 600 years earlier, there was a well-known Eucharistic miracle. And in fact, to summarize it very briefly, you have an individual who receives the viaticum. He vomits the viaticum forth, the body and blood of our Lord Jesus, and it's thrown into a fire, and miraculously it's not consumed, but it elevates over the fire. This happens essentially on 3 occasions. The Eucharist is brought to a local church. It returns to the place. And so Amsterdam becomes the city of the Eucharist. And that's, in fact, an ancient title for the city of Amsterdam. And so it's significant that in March, 600 years later, this is what Our Lady says to the visionary Ida. And I quote, "I see on my left somebody standing over me in a long white garment, full of womanly grace. I understand her to be the Blessed Virgin. She lifts up 3, then 4, and finally 5 fingers while saying to me, the 3 stands for March, the 4 for April, and 5 for May 5th. Then she shows me her rosary and says, 'This has saved you. Persevere to the end in saying it.' After a brief silence, she adds, 'The prayer is to be made known everywhere.'" Now, before Our Lady leaves, she says as well, actually Ida asks, "Are you Mary?" The answer. She smiles and answers, "They will call me the Lady, Mother." The figure walks past me, and then I looked at the palm of my hand. A cross is being laid down before me, and I have to take it up. I do so very slowly. It is heavy. All at once, everything is gone. So what do we get from this first message? We get the rosary has saved you, meaning Holland, and the cross must be returned to the center of the world. And we're going to see Our Lady elaborate on this message, which leads us to the cross, to the rosary, and ultimately to the Fifth Marian Dogma. Thanks for being with us. This is Dr. Miravalli saying, God bless you.